Perfect. We are technically live. Let's do this. So, hey, I want to welcome today. I want to make sure I get your name right. Is Dan Pilarski? Am I saying that right?
Pizarski.
Pizarski. All right. You're the VP of
Yeah.
Engineering, which is with LiveU, and I'm super excited to be talking to you today. So, Dan, tell me a little bit, first of all, what your role is with LiveU.
Absolutely. So, been with LiveU a little over 8 years. I'm VP of Engineering for the Americas. A lot of LiveU's operations are based in Israel, and the company was originally founded in Israel. And I've got a counterpart in Israel who's the VP of R&D, who really oversees a lot of the software and hardware development. My role is a little bit more on the product side when it comes to the U.S. and Latin American market, Canada and Mexico included. There's a lot of, LiveU got their start in news gathering, like what's called electronic news gathering. And there's a lot of news organizations in the US and especially on the East Coast of the US. And then as we've expanded into some other product lines like LiveU Solo and streaming, that's also a technology that was US centric in the beginning, although has now really become very popular in Europe and Asia as well. So my role becomes a little bit more like product management for LiveU Solo. I'm product manager for LiveU Solo and consultant on the other product lines where I work closely with teams in Israel and elsewhere around the world.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Well, you kind of became aware to me because, I'm working with Event Live, which is a streaming software, a lot of times used for weddings and events. And a lot of the questions come behind connectivity. A lot of the questions of the users are how to get a better connectivity. And so we know that LiveU is kind of a benchmark for a lot of, bonding, cellular bonding. So tell me a little bit about, first off, why LiveU, and kind of feed me some information about, what's the benefit so far.
Sure, absolutely. So, I think you probably run into our name as a benchmark for cellular bonding because we did invent it. Right, where LiveU was the first to bring cellular bonding to the market, and that was 15 years ago now. My boss Avi Cohen, who's one of the founders, along with two of his friends, and so we've really one of the advantages that I think LiveU has, even over some of our competitors that have now also introduced the idea of IP bonding, is we've been at it for a long time, and we've had that chance to really perfect the core technology and especially what we call the algorithm, the core parts of the protocol that respond to the way the networks are behaving and make decisions about how to do the exact bonding of audio and video to get the most reliable signal out. We've had a long time to perfect that in markets like news gathering that are extremely demanding in terms of reliability, top end sports production, and now into videography streaming, enterprise streaming, social media creators, all across the board. But it all kind of stems from that original news gathering market and a decade of honing that algorithm in that market.
So what exactly is cellular bonding then?
Sure. Cellular bonding is the idea to take public cell phone networks as a signal path to get video back. So if you think back to the kind of original days of what was called ENG or electronic news gathering, there was two styles of it then. One was satellite, and you probably, if you're old enough like me, you can think back to when you saw a news van that had the big giant satellite dish on the roof.
Of course.
And then the other is microwave, which is still sometimes used. And that's the news van that's got the big hydraulic pylon that comes up and puts the smaller dish, but very high up because it has to have line of sight directly to the next tower to get the signal back. And both methods have a lot of restrictions. They're expensive. Obviously, with satellite time, they can only work from certain geographic areas. You'd have to figure out where to park the van so that the skyscraper wasn't blocking you from the next tower and stuff like that. So what the founders of LiveU had was this idea of like, well, now everybody's got a cell phone in their pocket. This is back in the days of 3G. How can we get a high quality video signal back over the cell phone connection? And cell phones barely did data back then. They did data through modulation, not as a native data networks. And the bit rate you could get was very limited. So their idea was, well, what if we took a bunch of them and stacked them all together? So if I can only get 600 kilobits out of one phone, what if I took 5 phones and then I could get maybe 3 megabits per second, and maybe that's enough to get the video out. So they worked on a device that would encode video as H.264 at that time, break it up into its component audio and video little packets, and then send those over multiple signals all at once, multiple cell phone connections all at once. and then reassemble them on the far side so that you get a reliable signal out of it. And they, in iterations of the technology found, okay, well, we can't just send it all evenly, because out of 6 cell phone connections, 2 are working great and 2 aren't working so great. And so if we send the same amount of data over each one, it's not going to work. So then they began to develop this algorithm, which I was just referring to, that senses how each connection is doing multiple times per second, and makes a decision of, let's send more data over connection number 1, which is just doing fantastic, and less data over connection number 2, which seems to be having trouble. But let's test connection number 2 every now and then to see when it comes back, because one thing that we've learned over the years about cellular networks is the behavior is unpredictable. Just because you happen to be having a great connection right then doesn't mean that it doesn't change when a truck drives past and blocks your line of sight to the tower, or 40 other people all of a sudden take their phone out of their pocket and get on the same tower, or peculiarities of the way wireless networks behave. So it resamples multiple times per second, makes decisions about where to send the audio and video data based on how the networks are actually performing, and with the goal of being a much more consistent total bit rate and delivery, reliable delivery to the far side. But by doing that, by changing around, you might see it fluctuate quite a bit over the course of a long stream, how much data is sent over connection 1 versus connection 2, connection 3. And then, it kind of goes without saying in my mind, but maybe, some people that are not used to the technology might not get it right away. The idea being that out of n number of connections in the unit, you're splitting those across multiple carriers. So you've got some Verizon, some AT&T, some T-Mobile, some Sprint, before those were the same company. And then that way you've got more redundancy as well. Even if in a catastrophic thing, like somebody's tower goes down, or somebody accidentally cuts the Verizon, fiber, as happens once every 6 months or something, then your signal still goes out over the other carriers, and you still get a good, reliable signal out.
So is there a difference between cellular bonding and channel bonding? I've heard those said.
Yeah, there can be. Sometimes the terms are used a little loosely, but specifically with the term cellular bonding, in my mind, refers to the use of this technology in broadcast industry. So it implies that what we're sending is video and audio, and gotcha. and algorithms like ours take into account that it's video and audio we're sending, right? So they're generally one way. They've got a return channel component of it that I was just describing, but for the most part, the big amount of data is only going one direction. And we can use techniques to make sure that the data arrives on the far side, some of which have been used in other forms of video applications for years, things like forward error correction, where channel bonding or bonding for network connectivity, which has kind of gained some popularity in recent years, is a two-way IP bonding, where you're using multiple connections to the public internet as a way to get more bandwidth on your way out to the internet for any kind of IP connection. Checking your email, watching YouTube, uploading a big file back to the home office, that kind of thing. So there's many different forms of that, including things like active passive failover, or just where any one of my one connections goes over only one connection, but if a person sitting next to me, their connection goes over to the other one. That's called round robin. So there's some techniques there that work if my goal is to have the classic examples like the branch office, a branch bank office that's connected back to the main office, and it doesn't matter if my ISP suddenly goes down, we're still connected, so I can still do business. That's a very different, while they seem sort of similar on the very highest level, it's a very different implementation of the technology at the lowest level, where ours is very specific to video and audio delivery. So it's a little different. You wouldn't you generally don't often turn around and use something meant for that kind of branch office connectivity as a way to say, I want to reliably get video and audio back.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the actual products, because obviously that's how I found you. Sure. The LiveU Solo keeps popping up on my stream now, of course, and everything I'm searching for. So obviously that's seems like to me one of your more popular ones for at least my level of service. So tell me a little about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So about 5 years ago, we took that technology we had worked on in the news market, and we said, how are we going to get this technology into the hands of videographers, small production companies, individual streamers that are going to these emergent platforms? And this was right at the time. I mean, we launched really just about a month before Facebook Live went live. So it was right at the time the social was emerging as the kind of predominant video platform. So it's this really all the same encoding hardware as some of our products at the time. The same exact algorithm, same exact software, with a few key differences. We would host, so generally, if I'm a news organization, I'm hosting the software that receives this bonded stream in terms of back and audio and video back in my studio or my head end, because I want to get baseband video back out. But in this case, we knew end users using it in this context wouldn't want to do that. So we came up with this elastic cloud bonding as a service that we call LRT, same name we use for the protocol. And we made that, just a small monthly payment to say, you just pick where in the world you are, and then we'll allocate the cloud resources to figure out, let's receive this stream and turn it back into something that YouTube will understand or Facebook will understand. And that's what we do with the elastic cloud. That was change number one. And then change number two was to just simplify a little bit the workflow. So we have another control-based application called LiveU Central that's used by our larger customers, but that's really meant to handle, I have 150 units, in a fleet deployed all over the world, and I need to keep track of them. This was kind of more about, maybe I have 1 or 2 units and I need to quickly go live to Facebook. How simple can we try to make that? So we've strived over the years to make that as simple as we can, and that, and steered an actual user experience just towards that. So it's a slightly separate user experience, really under the hood uses all the same back-end and technology, but creates a more simple portal for for all Solar users to log into, and configure their unit to stream to Facebook, pick which posts they're streaming to, things like that. All of that plus the lower price, with price appropriate for that type of user. So
it really is.
That was our goal.
So there's 2 models of it though, correct? For the Solo?
You make a choice of which kind of input you're using. So HDMI, which is pretty much more common, especially in this day and age in this type of streaming, and then SDI, which is anybody's not familiar with it, it's a professional camera interconnect that was originally used in broadcast, has made its way down to some camcorders in the $1,500 to $5,000 range. I don't think I've ever seen something lower than $1,500 on the camera side that's using SDI. But it's a serial digital interconnect, it's called. Really can do all the same things as HDMI. In some ways, HDMI's got more features. One little advantage of SDI, if your camera does have it, is it's a very nice connector. The BNC connector locks on instead of the HDMI connector, which always has that risk of
I noticed that when I was looking at
a little yank out. Yeah.
So with the these are intended for a single camera use, or
That's right. You need 1 unit per camera if what you're streaming is a camera. We have a lot of users that will do a on-site production. So they're bringing in a little switcher like the Blackmagic line, or laptop software like vMix, something Wirecast that runs locally, and then we can act as the broadcast step after that. So you would plug the output of the switcher or the output of your laptop into the unit, and we would be the transmission step. But a more common, that's pretty popular and gains in popularity every day. But a more common use case would just be my camera, my LiveU Solo, and then that transmits either directly to my platform or to some cloud software first, which can make some modifications to it, like add graphics or switching or things like that.
Yeah, because I know that's obviously one of the kind of the next level up for guys like myself who are looking to do events. Yes, the single camera works great. We're fine with it, but then you start getting the, if you want static shots, say it's a piano recital or something, they want maybe a close up of the hands doing the actual keyboard, but they want a wide shot of maybe a guest speaker in between or something like that. So it's common to ask these questions. So I was just wondering how it connects. That makes sense though to me, be able to do that.
Yeah, so the input to our device, it needs to be baseband video, right? So HDMI or SDI. So it's either the output of the camera, or it's the output of some video software coming out as HDMI, or it's the output of a video switcher, which is going to be baseband video as well. But I think that statement just sometimes helps when you're quickly trying to draw up what's my exact signal flow going to be, or what's my layout here. It kind of makes a little more sense to think of it that way. Yeah,
I personally use it as a kind of IRL in real life where I'm mobile. Right. So I'm completely mobile. I'm following the action, stuff like that. So, and I've had a couple occasions where I've been streaming for 5 hour plus. So how long does this battery last for this kind of connection?
So the internal battery should last up to 2 hours broadcasting. It can be a little more depending on how many modems are in use, and actually even things like what technology the modems have to fall into. Like on a good LTE day, you'll get more battery life out of it than on a bad day where it's got to fall back to some 4G technologies and stuff like that. But you can supplement that with external batteries. So we've got some recommendations in the knowledge base that's all public. If you go there, look at the voltage input and the amp input, there's some even just like right off of Amazon laptop style power batteries that can power it,
like bricks.
As well as like if you're at the level where you're using something like Anton Bauer or V-mount, you can use what's called a D-tap cable to do the same thing, and power the unit. And then in that scenario, the internal battery kind of acts like a hot swap. So as you have an external battery plugged in, it's keeping the internal battery topped off. When the external battery goes dead, you've still got 2 hours worth of internal battery time left to swap in even another external battery if that's what you needed to do.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, it's been a challenge to try to figure out how to kind of carry, a battery source with me and not get tangled up. But that's a nice thing. Well, the whole package of itself. So the LiveU Solo is basically the unit itself, and then I've noticed there's casings, and then you had some donicles on top. And so talk about, is that then becomes a combo kit?
Yeah, so when we first launched the Solo, again, this is going back 5 years, it was really a couple things were taking place then. I mean, one, you could generally go buy USB modems more easily than you can today. So you could still walk into an AT&T store and say, hey, I want a modem for my laptop, and they would have them in stock. Whereas time has gone on, that's kind of fallen out of favor with the carriers, and so it was harder to acquire them. So then we ended up launching I guess about 3 years ago now, these what we call Solo Connect. Solo Connect kits. So the idea is not necessarily hardware we make, it's third-party hardware, but it's a pre-verified, pre-certified set of modems, either 2 or 3, that we know work with the unit and work well and work with the carriers that we're using. All pre-configured, the right SIMs inserted, ready to use. And then you can just come back to the Solo portal, register your kit by its serial number. That activates the data plan, and then we also broker the data plan for you. So it's true unlimited data. One of the other things we saw people struggling with was I can go to Verizon, get a plan, and they'll tell me it's unlimited, but really when I hit 25 gigs, it's gonna throttle me down and things like that. So these are true unlimited. They'll never throttle plans. So we try to make it, again, we've made an effort to make it as simple as we can. So you can buy, if you're new, if you don't have anything yet, you can go buy the unit and the Solo Connect kit together, and then that should be everything you need, minus the camera and lights and mics and stuff to get streaming, everything you need on the connectivity side to get streaming. Or if you are already a Solo owner and you're just finding it harder and harder to figure out data, just go buy the Solo Connect kit and link it to your current Solo, and that will get you streaming. So again, that's modems and the data plan, true unlimited data, and it bundles in that cloud bonding service that I mentioned into all one payment, so that you're not getting an invoice for like 3 different line items every month.
That's really nice. Yeah, I use T-Mobile, but I'm still in the LTE 4G kind of thing because of 5G is now limited. They say unlimited, but of course they give you, it's 100 gigs, which is fair still, but
a lot, yeah.
But still, right? It's still not true. So obviously that makes me think of the next thing: are these 5G capable? How's that all working out with you guys?
Yeah, so the Solo Connect kits are only LTE. That's important to say up front. Okay. The Solo itself you can use with 5G, of course. I've used it quite often with either some examples, not an exhaustive list. The Netgear Nighthawk 5G variant for AT&T, the Inseego M1000 or M2100 for Verizon. All 3 of those are MiFi form factor, which seems to be the trend in 5G. Which is understandable when you understand how 5G works, the new antenna requirements and stuff. It makes more sense fitting in a MiFi form factor than in the traditional stick USB modem form factor for now. Not to get off on a tangent, but they work great with the Solo. You can connect them to the Solo over Wi-Fi, over LAN, or over USB, which is kind of my preferred way to do it, because then however you're powering your Solo is also topping off the battery on the MiFi, and you don't have a risk of running out of battery on the MiFi, and you don't have the kind of worry over like, well, I might have these 2 things connected over Wi-Fi and they're within 2 feet of each other, but who knows? Wi-Fi still has some unpredictability, because it's wireless.
Exactly. yeah, anytime you can take that step away and
Yeah.
you know, and not worry about it, it's helpful.
Right.
So as far as the packages, the starter packs, for the Connect kits, is it a yearly commitment? Are you kind of, can you go month to month?
You can definitely go month to month. There is just a small caveat here. So there's no yearly commitment. Get it, activate it, use it, for the months you want, and then come back to the portal, cancel it, and at the end of that period, we won't charge you again for the next month. The only catch there is, and we're working to improve this, is when you go to restart it, you'll have to open a case with support and try to leave us, a few days to sort that out. We had originally some deals with the carriers where it was harder to restart the SIMs once they'd been stopped. Now that's fixed, thank goodness. So now it's much easier for us to restart the SIMs. We just need to catch up to actually make a big button in the portal that says reactivate or something, which will be a future step for us. But for now, email support will get you straightened out, but try to leave us a couple days there to get that sorted.
Yeah, I've been using a guy out in California, eTech Rentals, for Hotspot Rentals, and same thing. He's available. He's the GM, so when I call him up, he can add you pretty much right away, but he has to be available, right? It has to. So
some of those are old carrier rules, right? Like sometimes the carriers still have some funny rules around. You can't just immediately stop and start a SIM. They consider it things like vacation suspend, and there's rules around like how often a year you can vacation suspend a SIM and stuff like that. So, but it's getting better. That's why we're able to improve it on our side too.
So anybody listen, it just, word of the wise, give yourself time to reconnect, which makes sense, obviously, because you have to, you're going through somebody else to make sure that connectivity is there. So for a good customer experience, just start early.
Yeah.
Plus, I would hope you would, if you're booking a gig like this anyways, you would, get it far enough out that it's not necessarily last minute for that kind of thing. So one of the things you talked about earlier, the LRT. So what exactly is LRT? I don't even know what's it stand for.
LiveU Reliable Transport. So it was originally our name for the protocol that we've developed over the last 15 years. And then we also reused it as the name for the Elastic Cloud that receives that protocol, but turns it back into something that the other platforms can understand, usually RTMP, for the social network. So what happens is you're using LRT in the first mile, the difficult mile, on site at, wherever the event's happening that you don't know how the connectivity is going to be, or even in motion or moving. We have people use it on like travel streaming, whether they're walking around or in a car or on a train, even things, things like that. So that the first mile is the hard one, and that's where we use LRT for the reliability of the bonding. Once it gets to the cloud, we go what we think of internally as like cloud to cloud. So we're streaming out of our cloud right into Facebook, probably hosted in the exact same building and wherever those data centers are around the world, and it's just, you don't have a worry of reliability or bandwidth there. So we take it LRT in that first mile and then convert it back to repacketize it back to RTMP to go into the social networks. In the LRT protocol, we use a bunch of different steps of resiliency, not just bonding. Well, the bonding is the core of it, to make sure that video and audio is delivered reliably. So forward error correction was one I mentioned before, a little bit more technical, video delivery technique, things like confirmations and resends, which are part of the, protocol level to make sure that all the, audio and video packets got through. And then that back channel that I mentioned. So it'll even do things like slow the encoder down. Like if you would normally be delivering 6 megabits of video and we sense through our sensing mechanism that the network's only providing 4 megabits of video right now, we don't try to send 6, we send 4, to accommodate the network. And that ensures that there's not lost data on the other side. That's the downside of using some of the network-like bonding techniques that we were talking about before, channel bonding and stuff. With no coupling to the encoder, you might have your encoder set to a fixed 6 megabits per second. The network might take a little sudden dip and then even recover, but during that dip, you're going to lose data and there's going to be some loss of frames or audio.
That makes sense. Yeah. So kind of explain to me that like with the mix of carriers, right? I mean, if we're trying to talk about are with these packages, it looks like it's the AT&T, it's T-Mobile, those kind of things, Verizon. I think it was Verizon was one of them.
Yep.
Do you have a preference, or is it good to have different ones? Can you have two of the same? Because I'm thinking if some family has the family package, like I'll get two Donicles in the same carrier. Does that even help, or?
It can. Usually with a low count of connections like that, 2 or 3, we would definitely prefer to see them diversified. That's going to be much better for you, right? Okay. When you get up into some of the like LU product line that broadcasters are using, and you've got 6 or 8 connections, then obviously we double up on connections. So what's the advantage of doubling up on connections? One is there's a level of redundancy here that just has to do with the way these devices behave and the way wireless behaves. You can unpredictably be kicked off a cellular network, connected to wrong technology because there's a stack of technologies that can connect that. Just struggles where these things aren't always 100% perfect in terms of the way they connect, right? And we've all seen that on our cell phone. Of like, why did it just drop that call? I'm not in a dead zone. I'm not, driving down the road. It just suddenly decided to drop the call. Like, and I'm sure, a lot of people have experienced that. So that's the nature of cellular networks in some ways. And having 2 connections to the same network can help you in examples like that. The other reason, a little more edge case here for our typical streamer, would be what we call network crowding. So in LTE and lesser technologies, you've got this issue where too many people in one cell can take up all of the in-air resources that are available in that cell. And the way that the cellular network split up those resources is through some sort of multiplexing, usually either frequency divisional or time divisional multiplexing. And so then having more than one modem on the same network makes you look like 2 people, right? If it's trying to split up time or frequency between 1,000 people all in the cell, you're now 2 out of 1,000 instead of 1 out of 1,000 to get that slice of time. But again, those are all minor improvements on reliability versus having 2 diversified carriers is a big jump in reliability.
Yeah. When you talked about multiple people on kind of a cell tower, like what kind of number is that? Is that a 200 person wedding, or is that a stadium size 50,000? So
it's tricky because it depends on which technology the carrier themselves is deployed in that area, right? Okay. And in a more rural setting, your typical limit would be 1,000 people per cell, or the original expectation that technologies like LTE were built from is like 1,000 people a cell. And so then you can get into a scenario where you've got the whole population that would normally be attached to the cell. That's n number of people. And then now you're at a wedding, and that brought in a bunch of people from outside of the cell, to the cell. You could be at some kind of crowding scenario. But in an urban area where they know there's easily more than 1,000 people in every cell anyway, they've used technologies like microcells and femtocells to greatly increase the capacity of the network. You can have a cell that's meant to only be one small city block, and then that can have 1,000 people on it itself. And as soon as you wander to the next block, you're in a different cell, and now it's a different set of people. So generally, they've done a great job of increasing network capacity and keeping it there. Even in the stadiums, right? Yeah. There was a period there where 50,000 people in a stadium for sure could kill the cell network. And then people got frustrated because they wanted to sit there on their phones while they were watching the game and stuff. And so the carriers came in and they built a lot of femtocells, and they're all aimed, from the base, usually down by the field, aimed up at the stands, to cover just one little slice of the stands and stuff like that. So the capacity is kept up. And then of course 5G, now builds in significantly larger numbers. So the expectation of 5G was 1 million people on a cell instead of 1,000 people. Wow. And then, builds up from there. Not that the 5G networks that are deployed right now have accomplished that end goal, but it's the goal of 5G.
Yeah, totally makes sense. So one thing that was crossed my mind when we think about this is competitors. Like because how does LiveU in general kind of line up with like the Pterodax, things like that, like all those different competitors?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned, we invented this technology. We certainly feel like we've got the best algorithm out there. There's definitely, there's things we don't specialize in, and that some of our competitors do. And then there's some techniques in terms of like, if I really just want software on my cell phone that's going to bond, the two connections and let me use any data connection off the cell phone. That's not something, we focused on. So there's, it can get a little complex, and there can be a mosaic of solutions in terms of there's definitely areas where, as much as I love to say, we beat the competitor every time, there's things they've specialized in and things we've specialized in. But I think when it comes down to reliable streaming, to online social platforms, online video production tools, it's an area, we feel like we've really got the best algorithm, the most reliable hardware. We've got hardware and software that's been, again, battle tested in kind of the news market that's very demanding. So we certainly feel like we have an advantage there.
So I know Speedify has an app, which is a downloadable app, plus obviously they can use it through a browser. Do you guys, and I noticed you guys have LiveU Smart. Is there any comparability to those two, or?
No, they are quite different in terms of what they do. So, that's kind of who I was thinking of in mentioning, like, there are some use cases we've chosen not to focus on over the years. So Speedify is one of them, where it's, much more of a end user consumer, download it to any cell phone, bond those connections together, and then use any app on the cell phone. It doesn't matter whether it's delivering audio and video or not. I can get that bonding connection. That's not an area that LiveU has focused in on. So what LiveU Smart is really for LiveU users who have the infrastructure anyway, like our receive servers and those accounts in LiveU Central I mentioned, that are looking for a backup or a way to get additional video into their system. So in addition to having a bunch of LiveU units, they want to have as just a complete, oh my goodness, we were out here covering news and nobody brought a pack, and we've just got to get this covered, be able to pull their cell phone out and cover it. So, it still uses our same LRT protocol and bonding technology right on the phone, can bond the two radios on the phone. And I'm not going to say that there's not some possible applicability there to more of a streaming to social scenario, but it's not, again, it's not a direction we've gone. We've kind of focused on the hardware.
Everyone's got a cell phone. Everyone's got a cell phone in the pocket, and if someone's on the scene and they just needed needed newsworthy, get it up. That's a great asset to have as far as that.
Yeah, that was the use case we really had in mind with LiveU Smart.
So how about the LiveU 300? Is that the next step up from Solo? It is
the next step up from Solo right now, right? It's that would be the sort of entry level of what I think of as the LiveU product line. It's HEVC based instead of H.264 based. It's got a few other features, that the Solo doesn't have. Things like IFB, which is the ability to have a headphone plugged into the unit and hear the, control room talking to you as like the camera operator backwards. It's got a mode that can send files in addition to, streaming live video. So you can record video right to the unit itself and then send it on. So it's got the features that we, use in the broadcast space and don't use in Solo for both simplicity and cost reasons. Plus, it's got the HEVC encoder at its core, which is a little bit more expensive. And HEVC has got a lot of applicability for point A to point B streaming when I'm trying to get that video back to the studio. But because not many of the online platforms or social tools yet take HEVC as their input, it's got a little less applicability to the use cases that we're after with Solo.
That makes sense. Yeah. So, which areas and use cases would you strongly recommend like LiveU? Like, what's the?
Yeah, I mean, you almost don't even need to hear the pitch once you understand how the technology works. If your use case is in motion, like if you are walking around, or a bike messenger that's streaming your daily life, or doing travel streaming out on a boat or on a train, stuff like those are no-brainers to the LiveU methodology. Then I think the next one, which is probably the more common one, those are a little specialized, would be I have to go and do these live video shoots somewhere, and it's unpredictable what I'm going to get. I don't know that I'm going to get somebody's land drop. Even if they give me a land drop, I don't know how great it's going to be. Could be their home DSL that's not so good on the connectivity and stuff like that, or a business line that's got a lot of interruptions on it and stuff like that. Or maybe I'm going to hope that there's Wi-Fi there and it turns out there's not, or Wi-Fi doesn't reach around the corner. I want to be behind that use case. I think is our primary one. and you can show up with your Solo and your Solo Connect kit or your own modems and be, pretty assured, not 100%, but 90, high 90s% assured that you're going to get a reliable stream out and be able to stream from there. And that's kind of our, a real good match. Then we have some users that, even on the other side, if they're only going to have it connected to LAN, they just like the, remote control portal and even the idea of just having it back up to the LAN. I've even seen cases where people use it for things like e-gaming because they like the idea that they're not burdening their computer with the additional streaming. They've got just this dedicated device for it. And again, that's a little more specialized. The big bell curve of the users are the ones of just, I'm going to this location and I'm not sure, what the connectivity is going to be like at that location.
That is me, and that's the heart attack I have every time I show up someplace. So that's why I keep coming back to LiveU and just, the Solo, just saying I need this kind of connectivity. I need this assurance that it's going to be seamless for me. There's plenty of other things that are going to go wrong. It could go wrong. Yeah. But I don't want that to be the one thing. So, as a lot of people who are going to be watching this are pretty much videographers and maybe new to it, or just getting into live streaming. So what at the different venues or whatever, what are some of the common mistakes to avoid? Is there any kind of tips you can give?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first one is to test beforehand. So, let me break that down. I completely get that you're not always going to have a chance to test on site, where you are, but just a familiarity with the gear, how it behaves, what you want to set in the portal. The more you get to know that before you show up on site, because as you mentioned, I'm sure you guys have all these other stressors on site, right? In terms of like setup of everything else and the camera, and it's raining that day and you didn't plan, all that kind of crazy stuff. You don't want to be bogged down with, I forgot to set up my destination and I'm not, haven't really become an expert at the Solo portal yet, so I'm kind of struggling through setting up the destination to get there. The more you can just kind of get to know the gear, the portal, the equipment, the ins and outs beforehand, that's definitely going to benefit you. And then if you can test on site, like if they'll let you out the day before something and it's that kind of shoot, then that's always great because they might even just show you subtle things about locations, right? Wireless networks, even LTE networks, are affected by solid objects. So being on one side of the building versus the other, being around this wall, or near this window or further away from this window, make a difference to the connectivity. And that those are things that you sometimes can test on site, sometimes can't. And you've got to live with that world when you can't, but when you can test it, it's going to give you a little more assurance there.
Do you know of any like online resources that you can kind of look, like a cell map or anything like that? Are those any accurate? I've looked at them before, but
I don't want to bad talk any companies by name, but we used to think that some of the third-party independent ones that try to crowdsource the cellular connectivity strength were decent, and we would advise some users to use it. And it seems like over the years whether it's from lack of crowdsourcing or just changes on the carrier side, they've kind of lapsed, and it's not as reliable to predict true on the ground conditions as it used to be. Really, at this point, the carrier coverage maps on their sites, while they are a marketing tool for them, are reasonably accurate in terms of like where the towers actually are and where the signals are and things like that, and are probably the best resource to turn to in trying to predict it. But again, that's not going to tell you when there's also the wall has more metal in it than you realize, and the signal's not going to make it through it in the way that you predict. The last house you were in, the signal did. So, and anytime you can test on site, that's the best scenario.
Any kind of testing? I'm assuming the unit itself has some kind of testing, or do you have?
So actually, the Solo does not. That's a feature of the other LU units that Solo's envious of, and we need to roll back there. But yeah, just a test stream. Each person, depending on the tools you're using, make your own decisions about what a test stream means for you. But I know, for my own uses, I keep like a unlisted YouTube account and a private Facebook page, and I can just stream to those anytime I want, as a sort of test to say, and which I'm not accidentally exposing to all my friends on Facebook kind of thing, and see, all right, how's the signal going and how's it look and things like that.
Okay. So setting up these streams, can you use the unit itself, or is there The portal.
No, you do use the portal. So the portal remote controls the units around the world, and the unit connects to our command and control infrastructure as soon as you give it any of the connections, like any of the modem connections or LAN or Wi-Fi. That does mean you have to have some connectivity on site if you're a one-man show. So if you're using the portal and using the unit, set up your destination beforehand, and then when you get on site, you're going to need just enough connectivity to your phone to be able to use the portal from the phone and do any further connections you want. Once you have a destination set up, little bit depending on exactly which kind of destination we're talking about, but for the most part, with only like 2 exceptions, you can set up the destination beforehand, and then once you're on site, just hit start streaming on the unit. You don't have to have the portal. Nice, because it shows you a little more information than the small screen on the unit can, and if you needed to reconfigure something on site, you could do it through the portal, but you can use it through just the button on the unit itself, as long as you've preset up the destination beforehand. Then we also have some users that are a 2-man or more operation, and then now you can have somebody remote sitting in front of a laptop on good connectivity, and they can remote control the unit because the command control works, from anywhere in the world.
Gotcha. So do you actually have an app for the cell phone, or is it still just a web-based portal?
The portal itself is responsive, so you can use it on the cell phone or on the iPad.
Yeah. Yep. Good. I gotta be honest, that was probably a whole lot of questions that you were able to answer for me, and I appreciate it.
Sure.
It's I definitely came off with a better experience of as I've watched a dozen videos, probably at least, of the Solo, and everyone has their own interpretation. But I think this will help my specific audience of trying to figure out how to use this to better improve our business, because we really are. Most of us are using it as a small business and trying to stream weddings or events or whatever it might be, funerals even. So I appreciate your time, and again, if anyone's watching this, if they like to find out for more information, they can certainly go to LiveU.tv, and I'm going to pull up here real quick just to kind of add to the stream. This is I'm on the products page, and there's certainly pages and pages and pages of information. There's downloadable PDFs, there are tutorials, there are there's a ton of information. And today, Dan, I want to really thank you for taking the time to kind of help explain and get a little better understanding of how everything works today. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you stay tuned for any of our new videos, pretty much dropping weekly. So have a great day.